Orietta Moscarda from Rovinj Historical Research Center. Orietta Moscarda, as said, works at the Rovinj Historical Research Center of the Italian community living in Croatia and Slovenia. She deals with the history of the Upper Adriatic in the 90s, of migratory movements in the Upper Adriatic area, of popular powers in Istria and Rijeka, of transitional justice, and on issues related to the history of the Italian national group and the school in Istria. She's also the editor of the contemporary history journal Quaderni of the Historical Research Center. The title of her paper is Rovigno Women Workers in the Post-War Transition.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. The topic related to the work of women in the Eastern tobacco industry in the 20th century has been little investigated by historical researchers. Despite Rovigno, with its work in the tobacco and fish conservation sector, shows a long tradition dating back to the end of the 19th century, there are no studies that address the tradition and quality of women's work in their socio-economic and political emancipation in this town and in Istria in general. Instead, the memoirs of Istrian female tobacco workers exiled in Italy were studied in the framework of the vast research produced in the exodus of the Istrian population after the Second World War. Without pretending to be exhaustive, in this brief paper, some problems related to female work in the tobacco industry and to the position of women in the post-war Rovinj society will be addressed in the outline. For Istria and the territories claimed by Yugoslavia, the second post-war period brought great political, social, economic and national change. This period, characterized by the radical change in the sovereignty and political regime, determined a complex situation of general instability for the Italian-speaking population of Rovinj. The transition to a new political and economic system meant a series of complex innovations affecting also female workers and women's rights in general. Workers' rights were established and regulated by the new Yugoslav Constitution of 1946, which entered into force in Istria and other territories only after the official annexation in 1947. The tobacco factory of Rovinj, together with those of Pula, Rijeka and Senja, were declared to be national importance and passed under the Central Directorate for Tobacco in Belgrade. In 1947, the old cigarette-making machinery was transferred from the factory of Rijeka to Rovinj. After the war, the percentage of female working in Rovinj increased as compared to the war period, although they continue to represent still a low percentage of the local population, but higher if compared to the other Istrian small towns. Despite the big change, the jobs offered to women continued to be of physical nature. They were of the lowest qualification in the Rovinj economy, and in general required a position with few skills of work. In the collective image of the Rovinj society of the first and second post-war periods, the workers of tobacco factory were considered as economically self-sufficient and therefore perceived as little ladies. Their economic position meant financial security for the family, since the misadventures of farming activities often led to the loss of crops due to meteorological and environmental factors, which often left entire families in absolute poverty. These were generally young and poor workers engaged in repetitive and tired work. In Rovigno, the work of tobacco workers represent a family tradition which passed from mother to daughter. The tabacchine were highly industrious workers. Even taught from the memories, one cannot perceive many references to their working conditions, to the harmful environment, or to the disciplinary rigor. For the new Yugoslav powers, the masses of population and of working women had to be re-educated in the people's schools, and above all through the economic and political education courses that were supplied in the same factory, where a new ideologized culture had to erase everything that could bring back to mind the post-bourgeois society. In this sense, the introduction of evening courses to raise the population literacy was also important, somehow necessary against the backdrop of an industrializing society. But still, in 1951, these courses within the factory had not produced the desired results. According to the local party leader, these failures was due to the fact that the majority of the workers were family women and mothers who did not feel the need to educate themselves because their major concern was to look after the children and the house. In order to help female workers with the family responsibilities, the worker government introduced a series of regulations which would allow women to do their job as well as actively, and in the same time to be good mother for their children. Among these regulations, there was, for example, the new legislation of the work of women at the time of pregnancy or menstruation, according to which women were exempted from work that would require standing for long. Although these regulations were intended to help female workers to successfully perform both their work and the maternal duties, women mostly ignored them. In fact, even during pregnancy, they used to work in the factory and sometimes also carrying out heavy work. The widespread lack of knowledge of the new Yugoslav law and regulation was also evident in the high infant mortality rate that was recorded at the tobacco factory still in the 1950s. In the following years, especially after 1950, the introduction of the new rules and the protection measures of gender equality in the working environment consequently led to change in Rovinj's family relationship. The drive towards factory employment of as many women and men as possible, as well as the introduction in the 1950s of the policy of self-management and workers' participation in the factory through the councils of employees did not mean a complete equalization of women and men, especially with the reference to the position in the decision-making hierarchy and in the management structure. For example, the percentage of women who worked in the administration of the factory happened to decrease from 71% in 1945 to 48% in 1948, to 45% in 1951, and to 30% in 1953. Another factor that explains the decrease of female employment can be found in the phenomenon of the mass exodus of the local population, since a very large number of families departed from Rovinj, where they abandoned, before leaving to Italy, their workplaces and properties. To the tabacchine, who were at the time of public sector workers, the Italian government ensured a new job in Italy. Since March 1948, when the deadline were opened for the submission of the application for the Italian citizenship as required by the 1947 peace treaty, most of our tobacco workers applied for Italian citizenship and therefore abandoned the city. The first substantial flow of female workers from Rovinj moved towards the factory of Turin, Florence, Bari and Lucca. The flow ended in 1952, when the last Rovignan woman worker left from Turin. The data related to the requirement of workers confirmed this trend. In 1948, women made up 81% of the employees. In 1915, the percentage of women fell to 65%, while in 1952 this figure decreased to 53%. This transfer of workers was not This transfer of workers was not simple and straightforward process. One of the problems that arose in Rovigno was related to the treatment reserved to female workers, but also in general to the Italian-speaking population who applied for the Italian citizenship. They were fired on the spot, evicted from their house, their health and pension insurance were suspended, the wage payments and bank deposit transfers were slowed down, and so on. The equalization of optants, those who left, to enemies of the new power, created many difficulties and discrimination to the workers and other employees, at least until 1951, when with the agreement of Rome, Italy and Yugoslavia managed to regulate these problems. But discrimination and legal irregularities continued afterwards, especially in labor disputes against women who, after receiving the opt-in decree, were fired on the spot. The same manager of the tobacco factory reported at the party meeting that the political situation inside the factory is serious. There is an atmosphere of genuine fear. A confused, chaotic situation will also led to cases of public discrimination of employees who were turned away from dancing at the local workers' house because they were seen as optant. The form of intolerance and hostile methods used by the Rovigno authorities to prevent the population from opting actually produced the opposite effect to those intended, and did not but increase the desire of the population to leave. The gap left by the Rovignan workers in the factory were filled by women from the village of internal Istria and the surrounding countryside, from which the women used to communicate daily. They were younger rural women of Croatian nationality, very poor, that were coming from areas where initially the Yugoslav liberation movement and afterwards the new power had meant a considerable consensus by the Croatian peasant population. These workers who arrived in the 1950s from the surrounding countryside at the beginning found some problems in the relationship with the same Rovignan women, especially with respect to the language. In the country, they were good workers, accustomed to the heavy work of the fields. While in the 1950s, Rovinj society was traumatized by the factory workers who had applied for the options and had decided to abandon the territory and the workplace. The managers reacted by giving impetus to the new economic measures taken by Yugoslav federal government with the new strategy on the self-managed enterprises. The manager of the Rovinj company spoke about the success in the factory, since the workers were tied to the company and worked for the well-being society. If, in the one hand, Rovinj has lost a large portion of the Italian working class, which was supposed to form the basis of the new socialist society since they would have been to guarantor of the much promoted policy of the Italian Slavic Brotherhood. On the other hand, the new workers of the tobacco factory managed to complete, at the end of the 1951, the 5-year plans 248 days in advance, so that the Rovigno factory resulted to be the first of the old tobacco factories in Yugoslavia. Thank you.